They told her she was a waste of space. In the grand, cold library of the Davenport estate, surrounded by family vultures dressed in designer black, Emily Hayes was publicly branded useless. She was the quiet bookworm, the family failure, the niece who lacked the killer instinct of her corporate raider cousins. But her grandfather, the man whose billion-dollar legacy they were all gathered to claim, had left one final impossible puzzle: a sealed vault. A vault that wouldn't open for their greed or their influence. A vault that was waiting for the one name they had already dismissed. The air in the Davenport ancestral home, a sprawling stone manor in Westchester County, New York, was thick with the scent of old money and fresh grief. Or perhaps not grief. Emily Hayes perched nervously on the edge of a $40,000 antique Louis XIV chair, decided it was more the scent of anticipation. Her grandfather, Alistair Davenport, the patriarch of the Davenport Steel Empire, had been buried 3 days prior. Now the family had gathered for the main event, the reading of the will. Emily felt profoundly out of place. She, a 28-year-old rare book restorer who lived in a small Brooklyn apartment, was a sparrow in a den of wolves. Her outfit, a simple charcoal grey knit dress she'd thought respectful, felt like a burlap sack compared to the funereal couture worn by her aunt. Aunt Beatrice, her late father's sister, was the family's unofficial matriarch. She was a formidable woman, with hair sculpted into a severe platinum helmet and eyes that seemed to constantly calculate the net worth of everyone in the room. Her husband, Emily's Uncle Richard, sat beside her, a pale shadow of a man who nodded whenever Beatrice spoke. Then there was Beatrice's son, Mark. Mark was, in Emily's opinion, the worst of them all. He was 30 slick and already a vice president at Davenport Steel. He smirked as Emily caught his eye, his gaze sweeping over her with open dismissal. "Emily!" Beatrice's voice cut through the silence, as sharp and cold as the November wind rattling the leaded glass windows. "How good of you to attend. I trust you found the correct bus." Mark stifled a laugh into his silk tie. Emily's cheeks burned. "Hello, Aunt Beatrice. Uncle Richard." "Mark, the subway and train were fine, thank you." "Oh, the train," Beatrice mused, as if Emily had just described arriving via horse and buggy. "Alistair always did indulge your quaint lifestyle. Your father, bless his soul, would have insisted you join the family business. Instead, dusty books." Before Emily could respond, the heavy oak doors of the library swung open, and Mr. Harrison, the family's longtime attorney from the prestigious New York firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, entered. He was a stern man, his face a mask of professional neutrality. "Good afternoon," he said, setting his heavy briefcase on Alistair's massive mahogany desk. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Alistair Davenport. I will dispense with the legal formalities and move to the primary bequests, as per his written instructions." The room went utterly silent. Beatrice leaned forward, her diamonds glittering. Mark steepled his fingers, a predatory gleam in his eye. Mr. Harrison began to read. The manner, as expected, went to Beatrice, as she was the one who maintained the family's social standing. A significant block of stocks and a portfolio of properties in Manhattan were bequeathed to Uncle Richard. "To my grandson, Mark Davenport," Mr. Harrison continued. "In recognition of his work at the company, I leave my controlling interest in Davenport Steel, making him the new CEO and chairman of the board." Mark closed his eyes, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. Beatrice reached over and squeezed his arm, her expression victorious. This was it. The power had been transferred. And finally, Mr. Harrison paused, adjusting his glasses. To my granddaughter, Emily Hayes. Emily's heart thumped. She expected nothing. A small trust fund, perhaps. Something to be managed by Beatrice. I leave my collection of rare books and the sum of $100,000 to be used for her hobby. A wave of relief and a sting of humiliation washed over Emily. A hobby. That's all it was to them. Mark leaned back, his smirk returning. $100,000. Well, Emily. You can buy a lot of glue and leather for that. Try not to spend it all in one place. Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. It's more than she deserves. She provided nothing to this family. No support, no ambition. She just drifted, taking Alistair's money for her little projects. It's a waste. Now wait, Mr. Harrison said, holding up a hand. The family looked at him, annoyed by the interruption. That was not the final bequest. What do you mean? Beatrice snapped. You named the CEO. The house is mine. What's left? The vault, Mr. Harrison said. The atmosphere in the room changed. The main vault at the bank is part of the company's Mr.'s assets. Mark said, his voice suddenly sharp. It's mine now. Not that vault, Mr. Davenport, the lawyer replied, his gaze unblinking. Mr. Alistair Davenport makes reference to a private installation. He calls it the Phoenix Vault. A confused silence fell. The Davenports knew every inch of this estate, every asset. They had never heard of a Phoenix Vault. It is located according to this map in the sub-basement beneath the old observatory Alistair sealed off decades ago, Mr. Harrison explained. And its contents, Beatrice demanded. What's inside gold-bearer bonds art? I do not know, Mr. Harrison said. The will simply states the contents of the Phoenix Vault are the true key to my legacy. They are to be opened and managed by the person named as its executor. Mark stood up. Who is the executor? It must be me. I'm the CEO. Beatrice held her ground. It's me. I am the head of this family. Mr. Harrison looked down at the paper. The will is very specific. The vault is biometrically sealed. It will not open for anyone save the named individual. Furthermore, he paused as if bracing himself. There is a final family meeting required at the vault's entrance. Alistair was insistent on this point. He left instructions for a recording to be played. Then let's go, Mark said, already moving toward the door. The family, trailed by the lawyer, navigated the old, cold corridors of the house. They went down the main staircase, then down a smaller servants' staircase, and finally to a dusty, locked door that led to the sub-basement. Mark, using a key from Alistair's desk, opened it. The air was damp and cold. They descended a stone staircase into a vast, dark room that had once housed Alistair's telescopes. At the far end, built into the solid bedrock foundation of the house, was something none of them had ever seen. It was a circular, bronze-plated door, at least 10 feet high. It looked ancient, yet impossibly advanced. In the center was a single, dark glass panel. My God, Beatrice whispered, her greed palpable. He built a fortress. Mr. Harrison stepped forward and pressed a small, almost invisible button on the wall. The glass panel lit up with a soft white light. A digitized voice echoed in the cold room. Alistair Davenport Memorial Archive. Please state your purpose. We are here for the reading of the final bequest, Mr. Harrison announced. Understood. Initiating final family address. Mr. Davenport recorded this message 2 months ago. The panel flickered, and suddenly Alistair Davenport's face appeared on the screen. He looked older, sicker than Emily had remembered. His sharp blue eyes seemed to stare right at them. "Hello, family," his voice rasped. "If you are hearing this, I am gone, and you are all no doubt wondering what treasure I've hidden. You are probably right. This vault contains the most valuable thing I have ever created. But value, I find, is a matter of perspective." His digital eyes seemed to find Beatrice. "Beatrice, you value status. You have the house. I hope it keeps you happy." His eyes shifted. "Mark, you value power. You have the company. A heavy burden. I hope you are strong enough to carry it." The on-screen Alistair paused. "But this vault, this is for my legacy. And my legacy is not steel. It is not property. It is truth. And the truth can only be entrusted to someone who is not blinded by an all-consuming need. Someone who is not compromised." "What is he talking about?" Mark muttered, shifting impatiently. "For months," Alistair continued, his voice growing cold, "I have watched my family. I have seen the calculations, the maneuvering. I have seen the disloyalty." A shiver ran through the room. "And I have seen one person," Alistair said, "who has asked for nothing. One person who has been mocked, dismissed, and ignored. One person who, despite it all, has shown a quiet, unshakable integrity. The only person I trust to know what to do with the truth." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice snapped. "Get on with it, old man." Alistair's image smiled a thin, cold smile. "The vault you see is keyed to one name, one biometric signature, one person who I suspect you have all overlooked." Mr. Harrison stepped forward and read the final line of the will. "The executorship and all access to the Phoenix Vault and the assets contained within are hereby granted solely to Ms. Emily Hayes." The silence was so absolute, Emily could hear the drip of water somewhere in the stone room. Then Beatrice laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Her. The girl who glues paper for a living. It's a joke, a senile old man's prank. Mark's face had turned a dark, furious red. He stalked over to Emily, who had frozen in shock. He jabbed a finger in her face. "This is a mistake, a clerical error. You he hissed, his voice trembling with rage, "are nothing. You are a line item, a charity case. You are the most useless person in this entire family. You are not getting in that vault." "Mr. Davenport," Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm, "the will is ironclad, and the vault, well, the vault will only respond to Ms. Hayes. It is her name on the registry." Alistair's face on the screen gave one last chilling smile. "They called her useless," the recording of his voice whispered, as if he could hear them. "Now, let's see her unlock the vault her name is on." The aftermath of the announcement was pandemonium. "This is an outrage!" Beatrice shrieked, her voice echoing off the damp stone. "He was senile. He was on medication. I'll have this entire will thrown out by noon tomorrow. Mr. Harrison, you will file the paperwork immediately." "I will not," the lawyer said, his voice devoid of emotion. He was used to the tantrums of the rich. "I oversaw the signing of this will. Mr. Davenport was of perfectly sound mind and body. In fact, he was sharper than I've ever seen him. He was specific." Mark paced in front of the bronze door like a caged tiger. "This doesn't make any sense. A vault keyed to her. What's she going to do, bore it open with a lecture on 18th century binding techniques. "It doesn't matter what you think," Mr. Harrison said, his patience wearing thin. "The fact remains, the will stipulates that the vault must be opened now, in the presence of the family. Ms. Hayes, if you would." Emily felt like she was moving through water. All eyes were on her. Beatrice's filled with venom. Mark's radiating pure, undiluted hatred. Even Uncle Richard's, which were wide with a kind of pathetic confusion. I don't know what to do," Emily whispered, looking at the glowing black panel. "Just put your hand on it," Mark snarled. "Let's get this farce over with. It won't work. It's a mistake. The scanner is probably broken." "The will," Mr. Harrison said, reading from a page Emily hadn't seen before, "provides a further instruction, a riddle of sorts. Mr. Davenport was fond of them." He cleared his throat. "The scanner will confirm identity, but the lock requires a voice-activated passcode. The riddle is this: my strength is not in what I built, but in what I saved. My legacy is not in the steel, but in the ash. Speak the name of the one who rises." Beatrice scoffed. "Riddles." He really did lose his mind. The one who rises, it's Mark. He's the one rising to CEO. "Let me try," Mark said. He shoved Emily aside and pressed his palm to the scanner. A harsh red light flashed. "Access denied. Biometric mismatch." He stepped to the voice receiver. "Mark Davenport," he yelled. "Incorrect." "It's me, you old fool," Beatrice screamed at the door. "Beatrice Davenport, the one who saved this family's name from ruin a dozen times." "Incorrect." "Davenport Steel," Richard offered weakly. "Incorrect." Alistair's recorded voice returned his tone laced with amusement. "As I said, compromised, blinded. This vault does not open for greed. It opens for gratitude. It opens for memory." The screen then turned back to a simple white light, displaying the prompt, "Awaiting executor." All eyes once again turned to Emily. She took a shaky breath. She felt small, but the word Alistair had used memory echoed in her mind. She didn't have memories of boardrooms or hostile takeovers. Her memories of her grandfather were different. She remembered being 12, her parents recently gone, feeling utterly alone in the giant cold house. She'd hidden in the library, crying. Alistair had found her. He hadn't been the corporate titan. He'd been a quiet man. He'd sat with her and shown her a book, its spine broken, its pages water-stained. "This," he'd said, his voice gentle, "is a first edition Moby Dick. It was in a fire. Everyone said it was useless, that it was just ash and paper." He'd then shown her a workshop she never knew he had. "But nothing is useless if you're willing to see its potential, Emily. We just have to restore it." He had funded her passion. He paid for her to study conservation and restoration in Florence. He was the only one who never called her work a hobby. He called it salvation. Now, standing in the cold sub-basement, she looked at the riddle. "My legacy is not in the steel, but in the ash. Speak the name of the one who rises." It wasn't a person. It wasn't the company. It was a concept. The name of the vault itself. Emily stepped forward, her hand trembling pressed against the cool glass. The light flickered, scanning her palm, her fingerprints. A soft green light pulsed. A new voice, calm and female, spoke. "Biometric identity confirmed. Welcome executor, Emily Hayes. Please provide voice key." Emily's heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked at Mark, whose face was a mask of disbelief. She looked at Beatrice, who looked moments from having an aneurysm. She leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. "The Phoenix." There was a moment of absolute silence, then a deafening thud as a series of heavy bolts, unseen, retracted deep within the wall. A hiss of compressed air followed, and with a low, grinding groan that vibrated through the stone floor, the 10-foot bronze door began to slide open. Beatrice and Mark, their fury momentarily replaced by avarice, surged forward, pushing past Emily to be the first ones inside. "What is it?" Mark demanded, peering into the darkness. "Is it gold? Is it art?" As the lights inside flickered on automatically, they revealed the contents. The family stopped dead. Emily, stepping in behind them, felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't a vault full of treasure. It wasn't stacked with gold bars or priceless paintings. It was an office, a perfect modern subterranean study. It was lined floor to ceiling with climate-controlled bookshelves, but they weren't filled with Alistair's first editions. They were filled with identical grey archival binders, hundreds of them. In the center of the room sat a single, massive, modern computer terminal, its monitor dark. Beatrice was the first to react. "Binders. He built a fortress for binders. This is paperwork." She stormed into the room and ripped one of the binders off the shelf. "Contracts, ledgers. What is this?" Mark, however, was drawn to the computer. "This is a server, a high-end data server." He ran his hands over it. "This is the real vault, the data." He sat down and tried to wake the computer. The screen remained black. "It's password protected. Of course it is. Emily." "He must have left you the password." Emily looked around, overwhelmed. The room didn't feel like Alistair's public study. It felt personal. It felt like her workshop. The same smell of archival paper and book cloth. Her eyes landed on a single small leather-bound book sitting on the desk separate from the others. It was the Moby Dick she and Alistair had restored together when she was a child. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Tucked inside was a single folded note written in Alistair's familiar spidery hand. "My dearest Phoenix, if you are reading this, you have passed the first test. You remembered. I am sorry to leave you this burden, but you are the only one I trust. Your family is not what it seems. They have compromised the company. They have compromised my life's work. They are thieves. This vault does not contain the past. It contains the future. But to secure it, you must first understand the truth of what they have done. The server password is not a word but a promise. The name of the first life you ever saved. I am so proud of you. Eh?" Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The first life she ever saved. She remembered a stray cat she'd found in the rain outside the manor, half drowned. She'd nursed it back to health in her room, hiding it from Beatrice, who despised animals. Alistair had found out, and instead of being angry, he'd smiled and paid the vet bills. She walked to the terminal, her family's greedy eyes boring into her back. She sat down and touched the keyboard. The screen lit up, asking for a password. She typed in the cat's name, Barnaby. The screen flashed, "Welcome E. Hayes." And the server's desktop opened, revealing rows of encrypted files. But one file in the center of the screen was unlocked. A single video file labeled Play First. "What is it?" Mark demanded, shoving his way next to Emily, his cologne overwhelming. "An account number. A wire transfer." "What did he leave you?" "I don't know," Emily said, her hand hovering over the mouse. "Then click it, you useless girl," Beatrice shrieked. "Click the file." Emily flinched, but double-clicked the icon. The screen went black, and then Alistair Davenport's face filled the monitor again. This was not the formal recording from the vault door. This was different. He was in his study, the camera on his own laptop. He looked exhausted and frightened. "Hello, Emily," his voice said, quiet and strained. "If you are the one watching this, it means I am gone, and you are in a great deal of trouble. Or perhaps you are the only one who can fix the trouble I'm in." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "I have discovered irregularities, massive ones. My company, Davenport Steel, is being hollowed out from the inside, like a beautiful old book eaten by worms until only the cover remains." Beatrice and Mark exchanged a look, a flicker of something, not confusion, panic. "I am an old man, Emily," Alistair continued. "I built an empire of steel, but I was a fool. I trusted the wrong people. I let my own family, my own blood, handle the modern side of the business, the digital accounts, the offshore holdings. I didn't understand it, and they counted on that." "He's rambling," Mark said, his voice a half-octave too high. "This is nothing." "For the past 6 months," Alistair said, his eyes boring into the camera, "I have been using my hobby, this vault, this server, to mirror the company's private ledgers. I hired an outside auditor, a forensic accountant from Geneva, a brilliant man named Julian Vance. He found where the worms are hiding." Alistair's hand reached for the mouse on his end. A new window opened on the screen. It was a complex spreadsheet, rows and rows of numbers. "It started small," Alistair explained, his voiceover guiding Emily's eyes. "Padding expense reports, inflated invoices from shell companies. But then it grew." He highlighted a series of wire transfers, massive 8-figure sums moving from Davenport Steel's accounts to an untraceable holding company in the Cayman Islands, a company called MR Holdings. "MR Holdings," Alistair's voice said, thick with disgust. "It took Mr. Vance 3 months to crack it. So simple, really. So arrogant." He opened another file. It was the Articles of Incorporation for MR Holdings, and there, listed as the principal owners, were the signatories. The camera view on the screen pulled back, showing Alistair's face again. He looked utterly broken. "The signatories, Emily. The thieves who have been bleeding me dry, bankrupting my company and stealing your inheritance, are Mark Davenport and your Uncle Richard Hayes." The air was sucked out of the room. Uncle Richard, who had been silent this whole time, let out a strangled gasp and collapsed onto a chair, his face the color of ash. Mark was frozen, his face a grotesque mask of shock and rage. "No, it's a lie. It's a fake. He faked those documents." "He knew," Emily whispered, looking at her uncle, who was now weeping silently into his hands. "He knew." "Of course he knew." Beatrice suddenly lunged, not at her husband, but at Emily. Her hands, tipped with sharp red nails, clawed for the keyboard. You did this. You poisoned him against us. You manipulated a senile old man." Emily scrambled back, but Beatrice was fast. She grabbed the mouse, trying to close the file. "You will not destroy this family, you little parasite." "Stop!" a voice boomed. It was Mr. Harrison. He had been standing silently at the entrance, his face grim. He pulled out his phone. "Mr. Harrison, do something!" Beatrice shrieked. "She's trying to frame us." "On the contrary, Mrs. Davenport," the lawyer said, his voice like ice. "I am doing exactly what I was instructed to do. Mr. Davenport, in his final letter to me, stated that if this vault was opened and discrepancies were found, I was to execute his final directive. What directive? Mark snarled, finally finding his voice. I am the CEO. You work for me now. No, Mr. Davenport. I work for the estate, and the estate is not what you think. Mr. Harrison pressed a button on his phone. Mr. Vance. Yes, it's Harrison. We are in. The package is open. Please proceed. Proceed with what? Mark demanded. Alistair. Mr. Harrison explained. Gave his auditor, Mr. Vance, a dead man's switch. The moment I confirmed the vault was open, Mr. Vance, from his office in Geneva, was instructed to forward the entire contents of that server, every ledger, every transfer, every offshore account, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and to the IRS. Richard Hayes let out a high-pitched wail and fell to the floor. Beatrice's face went from red to a terrifying waxy white. Mark didn't move. He simply stared at the computer screen, which was now flashing a small icon, Upload Complete. You, Mark whispered, turning to Emily. His composure was gone, replaced by a primal, terrifying hatred. You, useless, bitch. You have just signed our death warrants. You have ruined everything. I didn't do anything, Emily stammered, backing away. Grandfather did. You did this to yourselves. That doesn't matter. Mark roared, sweeping the ancient Moby Dick off the desk. You think you've won. You think you're the smart one. You just exposed the company, your inheritance, to a massive federal investigation. The stock is going to be worthless by morning. The government will freeze everything. You haven't won anything. Emily, you've just inherited a corpse. He's right, Beatrice said, her voice a dead, hollow whisper. She suddenly looked 20 years older. The company is finished. The money is gone. It's all gone. She started to laugh, a dry, hysterical cackle that echoed in the vault. Congratulations, Emily. You're the queen of the ashes. Emily looked at the screen at the files that represented the total implosion of her family's legacy. She looked at her weeping uncle, her hysterical aunt, and her cousin, who seemed to be vibrating with a rage that was borderline murderous. The title of the vault echoed in her head. The Phoenix Vault. A phoenix rises from the ashes. But Mark was right. All she could see were ashes. There was nothing left to rise from. She had unlocked the vault, only to find a tomb. The following 2 hours were a blur of sirens, uniforms, and legal jargon. Mr. Harrison, it turned out, had not come alone. He had notified the local police, forewarning them of a contentious will reading that might require a civil standby. When he had called Mr. Vance, he had also, it seemed, signaled the authorities. 2 plain-clothes detectives, who introduced themselves as Detective Miller and Detective Chen, arrived with a warrant. The warrant wasn't for the house, but for data. The U.S. Attorney's Office, having received the data dump from Julian Vance, had apparently moved faster than anyone could have anticipated. Mark and Richard were read their rights. Richard was sobbing so uncontrollably he could barely stand. Mark, however, had gone rigid. He was silent, his eyes fixed on Emily, with a look of such profound loathing that she had to look away. Beatrice was in the library upstairs, being questioned by a female officer, her hysteria having conveniently vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury as she repeated the name of her lawyer over and over. Emily sat on the floor of the vault, her back against the cold bronze door. She felt numb. Mr. Harrison sat with her, his professional mask softened by something like pity. "He put you in an impossible position, Ms. Hayes," the lawyer said quietly. "He destroyed his own company," Emily murmured. "He destroyed, everything. Why? Why would he do that? And why me?" "He didn't destroy it," Mr. Harrison said. "They did." He gestured to the binders. This is the proof. He spent the last year of his life building a case against his own family. He loved that company. But I think he realized the company Davenport Steel was already dead. He was just signing the death certificate. "So what happens now?" Emily asked, her voice small. "Now, the U.S. attorney will seize the assets of M.R. Holdings. They will likely freeze Mark and Richard's personal accounts. Davenport Steel will be locked down pending a forensic audit of a scale I can barely comprehend. The stock will plummet to zero tomorrow morning. It will be carved up and sold for parts to pay its creditors. The Davenport name, I'm afraid, will be synonymous with fraud by nightfall." "So Beatrice was right," Emily said, a single tear tracing a path down her dusty cheek. "I am the Queen of Ashes." "Perhaps," Mr. Harrison said, standing up. "The detectives need me to sign the evidence manifest. They are taking the server, but per the will, the vault and its remaining contents belong to you. I suggest you review what's left." Alistair was not a man to leave loose ends. He called this the Phoenix Vault, not the Ashes Vault. The lawyer left, leaving Emily alone in the subterranean office. The police had taken the server, leaving a glaring empty space on the desk. All that remained were the hundreds of grey binders, the empty chair, and the copy of Moby Dick that Mark had angrily thrown to the floor. Emily picked it up. The spine, the one she had so painstakingly repaired, was broken again. She sank into the chair, the sense of loss overwhelming. She was once again that 12-year-old girl alone in the library. Her grandfather had given her a purpose then. Now he had given her. What a ruin! She looked at the binders. She pulled one down. It was labeled Project PA Year 1. It was full of technical schematics, patent applications, not for steel but for optics laser scanning. She pulled down another. PA Year 2, Software Development, Archival Kernels, and another. PA Year 3, Prototypes, Client Trials Vatican Library, Bodleian Library. This was not a steel company. This was a tech company. She went back to the desk. Tucked away in a drawer Mark had overlooked was a simple silver laptop, a personal one. She opened it. It was not password protected. The desktop was clean, except for one folder labeled simply Phoenix. She opened it. Inside was a business plan, a full detailed 200-page business plan for a startup company. The name on the letterhead was Phoenix Archival Solutions. Emily began to read. Her numbness was replaced by a racing electric shock. Alistair, in his last year, hadn't just been building a case against his family. He had been secretly building a new company. He had been using the profits from Davenport Steel, but not just to move them to offshore accounts. He had been siphoning millions before Mark and Richard could, redirecting them into this new venture. He had used his pet project with Emily, her love of restoring books, as a smokescreen. Phoenix Archival Solutions was a company built on a single revolutionary idea. Alistair had funded a team of engineers in a private unmarked R&D lab in Delaware, registered under a holding company named Barnaby LLC to create a new form of non-invasive scanning. A technology that could digitally archive fragile ancient manuscripts without ever touching them, using a combination of terahertz imaging and AI-driven text recognition. The spreadsheets in the folder showed the money. He had poured nearly $90 million into it. The binders on the shelves were the R&D. The prototypes were already in use secretly at the biggest libraries in the world. Alistair knew Davenport steel was a 19th century dinosaur, being eaten alive by 21st century greed. He couldn't save it. Done. He let it burn. He had created a lifeboat. But there was one last file. A letter text file. Emily. This is the second riddle, and you are the only answer. Phoenix Archival is my true legacy. It is a brilliant, world-changing company. But it is vulnerable. It is, as of this moment, an asset of the Davenport estate. And the estate is now tied to a massive federal crime. The vultures will try to claim this. The government, in its effort to pay the steel company's debts, will try to liquidate this new company before it ever truly flies. They will see it as just another asset to be auctioned. They will not understand it. They will say it is a hobby, a pet project. They will call it useless. They will try to take it from you. You must not let them. The will gives you the vault. This is the vault's real content. The data on the server was just the key to close the old door. This business plan is the key to open the new one. You are the only one who speaks the language. You are the only one who understands that preservation is not about the past, it is about the future. You are not a book gluer, Emily. You are a guardian. Don't let them call you useless. Don't let them take your future. This is the real inheritance. Now go and fight for it. A. Emily closed the laptop. The numbness was gone. The fear was gone. A cold, clear anger had taken its place. She walked out of the vault, leaving the broken Moby Dick on the desk. She walked up the stone steps past the chaos of the police investigation and into the grand library. Beatrice was there, her lawyer, having just arrived. Mark was in handcuffs, being led out the front door, his eyes still burning with hate. "There she is!" Beatrice shrieked, pointing at Emily. "The one who destroyed us. I hope you're happy, Emily. I hope you enjoy your... nothing. They will take everything. You will be just as penniless as you were yesterday." Emily stopped. She looked at her aunt, this woman who had tormented her for 2 decades. She looked at her sharp designer suit and her perfectly cruel face. "You're wrong, Aunt Beatrice," Emily said, her voice clear and strong. It didn't echo, but it cut through the room. "What?" Beatrice scoffed. "You said I inherited a corpse. You're right. Davenport Steel is dead. You and Mark killed it." Emily walked closer, her gaze unwavering. "But Grandfather didn't leave me the steel company. He left me his legacy. And you were all too stupid, too greedy and too compromised to even know what it was." Emily smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of Alistair Davenport. "You were right about one thing. I'm not a business person. I'm a restorer. And I'm about to restore the family name. Now, if you'll excuse me," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "You're in my house. I'd like you to leave." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked past her sputtering apoplectic aunt and dialed the number for the lead engineer listed in the business plan. "Hello," Emily said, stepping out onto the cold stone terrace. This is Emily Hayes, Alistair Davenport's granddaughter. Yes, that one. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to start right now. The 6 months that followed were a trial by fire. Emily had been right. The battle had just begun. The fall of Davenport Steel was immediate and catastrophic. It was the lead story on every financial network. Davenport CEO and CFO arrested for massive fraud. Historic steel empire collapses. Davenport heiress left with billions in debt. The U.S. Attorney's Office, in its quest to reclaim the hundreds of millions stolen, placed a lien on all assets of the Davenport estate. That included the Westchester Manor, the art, the cars, and as Alistair had predicted, the unassuming Barnaby LLC and its Phoenix Archival project. The government's lawyers saw Phoenix Archival as a black hole of debt, a vanity project Alistair had wasted nearly $100 million on. Their plan was simple: liquidate it. Sell the patents, sell the prototypes, sell the lab equipment, and use the scraps to pay back the steel company's creditors. Beatrice, having lost the house, was living in a rented condo, her assets frozen. She spent her days giving rabid interviews to any tabloid that would listen, painting Emily as a conniving, treacherous snake who had destroyed the family out of jealousy. Emily was, for a time, truly alone. She sold her Brooklyn apartment and her rare book collection, her own assets, to pay for the legal fight. She moved into the modest R&D headquarters in Delaware, sleeping on a cot in a back office. The first hearing was in a sterile federal courtroom in Manhattan. Emily sat at one table with a single, overworked probate lawyer. The other table was crowded with government attorneys, creditor lawyers, and lawyers representing the newly bankrupt Davenport Steel. The government's attorney, a sharp man named Peterson, laid out his case. "Your Honor, Ms. Hayes is a book restorer. She has zero business experience. She is clinging to an asset that is nothing more than a sinkhole. We have a buyer, a large tech conglomerate, willing to purchase the patents for $12 million. We request the court approve the sale to satisfy the estate's creditors." "$12 million?" the judge, a pragmatic woman named Judge Kaplan, asked. "Mr. Davenport spent nearly $90 million on it." "Exactly, Your Honor," Peterson said with a smug smile. "It was a failed project, a rich man's hobby. We are lucky to get 12. Judge Kaplan looked at Emily. "Ms. Hayes, you are contesting this." Emily stood. Her hands were shaking. She was wearing an ill-fitting suit she'd bought at a consignment shop. She looked at the sea of hostile faces. "Your Honor," Emily said, her voice quiet. "Mr. Peterson is wrong. He's wrong about everything. He says this project is a failure. He says I have no experience." She placed a stack of papers on the witness stand. "This is a signed letter of intent from the Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana, the Vatican Library. This is another from the British Museum. They are not intent to buy. They are intent to license. They are beta testers who are calling our technology revolutionary and the new gold standard in archival preservation." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "Mr. Peterson calls it a hobby. I call it the future. He wants to sell the patents, the engine of the company, for scraps. I am asking for the chance to turn the engine on." "And how do you plan to do that?" "Ms. Hayes," the judge asked, leaning forward, intrigued. "The estate is bankrupt. You have no operating capital." This was it. The moment. "I don't need the estate's money." "Your Honor," Emily said, "I have my own." A murmur went through the courtroom. "I have secured a line of credit for $50 million. Peterson burst out laughing. "From who? She's penniless." "From Mr. Julian Vance," Emily said clearly. The courtroom fell silent. Julian Vance, the Geneva auditor, had become a minor celebrity. the whistleblower who had brought down the Davenport empire. Emily explained. Mr. Vance, it turns out, was not just an auditor. He was an old friend of my grandfather's. He was impressed that I had chosen to fight for the company instead of letting it be sold. He believes in the technology. He has agreed to be my primary investor and partner. He has also agreed to serve as Phoenix Archival's interim CFO. Judge Kaplan looked at the government's lawyer. Mr. Peterson was no longer smiling. Your Honor, Emily pressed, the government wants to satisfy creditors. Selling this company for $12 million is a rounding error against the $400 million that Mark and Richard stole. But if you give me 6 months, if you unfreeze this asset and let me run it, I believe Phoenix Archival can generate billions in revenue, enough to actually make the creditors whole, and, she added, to pay the back taxes my family evaded. She was in essence offering to clean up her family's entire mess. The judge looked at the letter from Julian Vance. She looked at the letters from the Vatican and the British Museum. Then she looked at the government's lowball offer. Mr. Peterson, the judge said, your motion to liquidate is premature. I am granting Ms. Hayes a stay. 6 months. She has 6 months to prove this company is viable. If she fails, we sell it. If she succeeds, well, let's see if the Phoenix can in fact rise. Emily walked out of the courtroom, her legs feeling like jelly. She had won the battle. But the war to build a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch in 6 months had just begun. The next 6 months were a blur of 20-hour days. Emily was not a CEO. She was, as she had told her grandfather, a restorer. So she did not run the company. She restored it. She brought Julian Vance in as CFO, and his ruthless Swiss efficiency cleaned up the Barnaby LLC books, making them transparent and ready for investors. She promoted the lead engineer, a brilliant but socially awkward woman named Dr. Aris Thorne, to Chief Technology Officer. Dr. Thorne had been Alistair's secret weapon, the brain behind the scanner. The team, which had been working in fear, suddenly found a new sense of purpose. Emily's useless skills became her greatest asset. The tech conglomerates who wanted to buy them out didn't understand the client. They talked about data optimization and scan speeds. Emily, visiting the libraries and museums herself, spoke their language. She talked about preserving cultural heritage. She understood the irreplaceable value of a 1,000-year-old manuscript. She wasn't selling them a scanner, she was selling them immortality. While Dr. Thorne perfected the technology, Emily and Julian Vance hit the road. They didn't go to Silicon Valley venture capitalists who wanted to gut the company and go public in a year. They went to old money. They went to philanthropic foundations, university endowments, and historical societies. They went to people who, like Alistair, understood that some things were worth more than a quarterly report. The useless bookworm, who had been mocked for being quiet, turned out to be a powerhouse negotiator. She was soft-spoken, but her knowledge was encyclopedic. She was polite, but she was unbending. She was, as Julian Vance remarked to a potential investor, a velvet hammer. 3 months in, they had their first breakthrough. A consortium of universities, led by Harvard and Oxford, signed a collective $150 million contract for the Phoenix scanners and a 10-year subscription to their archival cloud service. 4 months in, the French government signed a $200 million deal to digitize the archives of the Louvre and the Bibliothèque Nationale. By the end of the 5-month mark, Phoenix Archival Solutions was not only viable, it was profitable. It had a valuation confirmed by Goldman Sachs of $1.2 billion. Emily's name was no longer a footnote in her family's fraud trial. It was on the cover of Forbes and Wired. The Phoenix Rises one headline read, "How the Useless Heiress Turned Her Grandfather's Hobby into a billion-dollar tech empire." The court date arrived. The courtroom was packed. Judge Kaplan looked at the new valuation report. She looked at the government's lawyers, who were silent. "Ms. Hayes," the judge said, a small smile on her face, "it seems you have exceeded expectations." The stay was lifted. The asset was officially unfrozen and declared the sole separate property of Emily Hayes. She used the company's first profits to pay off the legitimate debts of the old steel company, making the creditors whole and separating her new legacy from the old. As Emily left the courtroom, she was met by a media scrum. But one person stood on the steps apart from the rest. It was Beatrice. She looked small. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap-looking department store suit. Her platinum hair was dull. The fury was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow look. "Emily," she said, her voice raspy. Emily stopped, her lawyers tensing beside her. I have nothing," Beatrice whispered. "Richard is in prison. Mark took a plea deal. He'll be in for 20 years. They took everything, the house, the accounts. I am working as a hostess in a restaurant in Queens." Emily looked at her aunt. She felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a void. "What do you want, Beatrice?" Emily asked. "A job." Beatrice begged, her eyes filling with tears. "Anything. A receptionist. I can answer phones. Please, Emily. For your father's memory. For the family." Emily stared at her for a long moment. She remembered the girl in the knit sweater. She remembered the sting of the word useless. "I am hiring actually," Emily said. Beatrice's face lit up with desperate hope. "My R&D lab in Delaware is expanding." Emily continued, her voice flat and cold. "The night shift janitorial crew needs a new supervisor. The pay is $19 an hour. You'd have to move to Wilmington." Beatrice's face crumpled. A janitor," she spat, the old venom returning. "You'd make me clean toilets." "It's a job, Beatrice," Emily said, turning to walk away. "It's more than you offered me. It's not nothing. It's not useless. It's work. Something you've avoided your entire life." She left her aunt standing on the steps, consumed by the final burning ashes of her own arrogance. 1 year later, Emily Hayes stood on a stage in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. She was the keynote speaker, a global leader in the new field of digital preservation. She wore a simple, elegant, dark blue dress, the quiet confidence she now exuded, holding the room of billionaires and world leaders captive. "We are not a tech company," she said, her voice resonating through the hall. "We are a memory company. We believe that our history, our stories, our art, are not just things to be locked away in dusty vaults. They are a living part of our future. My grandfather built an empire of steel, a material of strength, but he taught me that true strength isn't in steel. It's in the things that endure, the things that survive the fire, the things that, when called useless, find a way to rise again." Her speech was met with a standing ovation. Afterward, she flew back not to New York but to Delaware. She bypassed the new gleaming glass headquarters of Phoenix Archival and drove to the Westchester Manor. She had bought it back, at auction, for pennies on the dollar. She didn't live there. She was turning it into the headquarters of the Davenport Foundation for Cultural Preservation, a non-profit funded by her company that would restore and archive priceless works for free. She walked through the empty, echoing halls, finally arriving at the library. The room was empty, the furniture sold off. She went to the sub-basement. The bronze door of the Phoenix Vault was still there, open. She had left it just as it was. It was her office now, her real office. The empty binders were gone, replaced by the books she had repurchased. Her first edition, Moby Dick, its spine broken for a second time, sat in the center of the desk. She ran a hand over it. She had left it broken. A reminder. Julian Vance, now her full-time CFO, and more importantly, her friend, met her at the door. "Another successful trip, boss," he said, his Swiss accent always carrying a hint of a smile. "It was good," Emily said, sitting in Alistair's old chair. "You got a letter," he said, handing it to her, "from a federal prison. It was from Mark." Emily opened it. It was not an apology. It was a single, hate-filled page, detailing in graphic detail all the ways he was going to destroy her when he got out. Emily read it, her expression unchanged. "Trouble?" Julian asked. "No," Emily said. She didn't tear it up. She didn't burn it. She folded it, walked over to a high-tech scanner in the corner, the very first Phoenix 1.0 prototype, and placed the letter on the scanning bed. "What are you doing?" Julian asked. "Archiving," Emily said, as the brilliant, harmless laser light swept across the page. "I'm preserving the truth. All of it. The good, the bad, and the useless." The machine beeped the letter now digitized, saved forever, in an encrypted cloud. Emily smiled, looking at Alistair's desk, finally understanding his last great lesson. He hadn't just saved his company. He had saved her. He had taken the one person they all thought was broken, and he had remade her. He had shown her that her useless passion was in fact the only thing in the world that truly mattered. She was Emily Hayes. She was the restorer. She was the guardian. And she was the Phoenix. And just like that, the woman they called useless became the only one who mattered. Emily didn't just inherit a fortune. She built a new one from the ashes of her family's lies, all because her grandfather knew that real value isn't in steel or stock prices, it's in quiet integrity. The family who saw only greed was left with nothing, while the one who valued history became the one to make it. That is the ultimate karma. What did you think of Emily's revenge? Was it colder than the vault itself? Let me know in the comments what you thought of Beatrice's final pathetic plea. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. We have new dramas dropping every week, and you won't want to miss what's next.